Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Darrell Utt. Darrell is the Chief of Business Operations at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, and he's a retired Green Beret. They're doing a lot of great things over at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, so we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to dig into Darrell's past a bit as a Green Beret in this episode. So with that, welcome to the show, Darrell. I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks a lot, Scott. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the listeners who maybe aren't all that familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm sure most aren't familiar with me, but yeah, small town kid from Huntington, West Virginia. As soon as I graduated high school, joined the Army all the way back in 1990. Started out in the infantry, did a couple years, had a couple different duty locations, West Coast, ended up Fort Campbell. Ended up going through Special Forces assessment and selection, was lucky enough to make it through and went through the Special Forces qualification course and spent 10 years operational in an operational detachment Alpha, which was the pinnacle of my career. Also did some staff time. Altogether did about 26 and a half years before I retired. My first post-military job took me to the Museum of the Bible as the Director of Security, Director of Ops. Did that for a little while. I was a security operations consultant for a couple of years, and that ended up with me being fortunate enough to be at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation as the Chief of Business Operations. Been here in this role for about a year. Absolutely thrilled and honored to be doing this job. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful. Been very fortunate, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get back to the Medal of Honor Museum and everything that you guys are doing there in a second, but my mind tends to work better kind of in a chronological order. So let's jump back a bit to your time as a Green Beret. And I know anyone in special operations, like of any branch, doesn't matter which one you're talking about here, you gotta be pretty darn resilient in order to do the job that you all did and do. So talk to me about how that served you, that resiliency, not only in your military career, but also how it's continued to serve you afterwards, and anything else that might have occurred during your time serving in the Green Beret.
Yeah, sure. I have three simple rules, three simple steps for success, and I think this has served me well from being a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid to an infantryman, to a Special Forces Green Beret, to a Director of Operations, Chief of Business Operations. Three simple rules: work hard, be humble, and don't quit. Those have always, they're so simple. They're so simple, but they've always served me well, and they're great lessons. Work hard, be humble, don't quit.
Yeah, for sure. Those things, those are just so simple. But if you apply that mindset, those three simple steps to anything in your life, like God, anything, you're going to be successful in it. You work hard at it. You're humble and you accept, responsibility for things that you might have done, or understand that you don't know everything, and maybe somebody else out there can help you out and teach you some things. And just being humble like that makes a ton of sense. And just not quitting. That's a huge part.
Yeah.
Showing up, not quitting, that's huge, right?
Scott, I want to talk to you about a time where this really paid off for me. And if I could just take you back and imagine this. You make it through Special Forces assessment and selection. Like, you're feeling so good. You're feeling great. And that's just the entry into the Special Forces qualification course, which is over a year. So you make it through a year plus Special Forces qualification course. You don the Green Beret. You are a Special Forces Green Beret. My first duty station, I was forward deployed. I was Stuttgart, Germany. I'm a Special Forces Green Beret. I'm tip of the spear. I'm the guy. I'm the man. I'm on top of the world. And then I find myself on the bunny slopes in Garmisch, Germany, with skis on my feet. I've never skied before a day in my life, and I'm absolutely humbled. I'm absolutely crushed. I'm out here full Gore-Tex, camouflage Gore-Tex, and I'm with these little 3 to 5 year old German kids on the bunny slopes, and I'm doing pizza and I'm doing French fries, and I'm just trying to like, what is going on? Like, what is happening here? And that was just such a big challenge for me because I felt like I was on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, I'm so humbled and just kind of like taken back down to reality. I'm doing something that I've never done before. And it put me in such a weird place. And then, I finally conquered pizza. I finally conquered French fries. And I started going to like the beginners little slope. And keep in mind, this is Garmisch, Germany. This is like destination vacation, like beautiful, just beautiful scenery and mountains. A lot of people vacation there, and we're there to train. Special forces, we're there doing cold weather training, we're doing ski training, and I'm with a bunch of guys that have pretty hair. Everything's all gelled up, they got glasses on, they got the sunscreen on their nose, they look like Olympic skiers to me. And I'm still I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I do this? Because I don't know if you've ever skied military, but they don't have the boots like this, like the civilian footwear, like it pretty much gets you in that position that you need to be in. The military, because you take your skis off, you're wearing the same boots so you can still walk, because you can't walk really that well in the civilian setup. But it's really hard to learn how to ski if you've never skied before. So once I got to the basic, you got people that are going up the ski lift, they're laughing. And then everybody called it the Gore-Tex slide. You would start making a little bit of progress and you're just sliding down on the Gore-Tex, just racing down. And it was such a humbling experience. And then everyone else is so happy because, they're in Garmisch, Germany, they're skiing, like we're getting paid to do this. And, I would come in at lunchtime and, people are having a great time. They're laughing. Well, I'm cold, I'm wet because I'm like sliding in the snow, and, they're just having a great time. So I really had to kind of work through that in my brain. And eventually I got to a point where, they kept switching instructors, and I got to an instructor, Kirk Teeney, who I want to give a shout out because he was actually, skilled enough to kind of take me under his wing and said, "Hey, Darrell, you're really thinking this way too hard. Like, I know that you really want to ski and you want to do this. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to chew some gum." And I was expecting something like some grand lesson from this ski master who had done all of this training and had been in special forces for all this time. But he said, "I want you to chew some gum, and then I want you to let it rip." And I was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I can't believe that that's my guidance. That's how I'm going to learn to ski. But I will be darned, man. I got some gum, and I kind of had like a little internal conversation with myself, and I pointed my skis downhill and I let it rip. And I had to block out all of the fear of embarrassment, the fear of laughter from all the Germans. Oh, by the way, the German army was out there. They look like a flippin' Olympic skiing team, and they're all laughing because, it's that little competition between Germany and the US. And, here's a guy that's sliding down the flipping hill. Oh, and, they call it yard sell when you crash and then your gloves go one place, your ski poles, it's like it's a big rummage sell. But, I really had to get through that. And, it's just like anything else. It's, to get better at shooting, you got to, pistol shooting, you got to shoot pistol. Get better at long range shooting, you got to shoot long range. You get better at podcasting, you got to podcast. Get better at skiing, you got to ski. But that advice really kind of zeroed me in. And I know it's kind of like it's a funny story at my expense, but I do think there's a lesson there because so many times I've found myself in the same place. You know, you, when I transitioned from the army, I was working at a museum of the Bible, I never worked at a museum in my life, so it was like I was starting over again. And you have to, you have to get rid of that fear, and you got to try new things and look for the opportunities. And that work hard, be humble, don't quit. It's just served me so well. And it's been years since I've been skiing, but I can actually ski now, so that's a success. But it's the essence of drive on. The
Yeah.
drive on pipe, like you got to keep going, don't quit. There's going to be adversity. Drive on, keep going, don't quit.
Yeah, and that story definitely to me seems like that's a humbling story. That's a thing where you're out there, you're on top of the world, you're this green beret, this macho dude who can do anything, and then here's this thing. It's like I can't do this. This is terrible. This sucks. And Th but then going on through your steps here, you worked hard at that, right? That was not something that came easily to you. You had to do a lot of hard work. You had to be humbled, and you couldn't quit on it either. I know when I was much younger, I went on a ski trip and was trying to impress some people that I was with. They're like, "Oh, I had gone skiing before, but I was probably not much better than you were at that point, that what you were talking about there." And all the people that I was with, they were skiing all their lives, and they were great skiers, and they wanted to go down the tougher hills. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? How hard could it really be? Well, they were down at the bottom of the hill waiting for me as I'm sliding down the hill. I'm tumbling. I probably could have killed myself going down this hill the way I was going, because I was so out of control. But yeah, I after that I was like, this can't happen again. I can't go down that one. I need to go back to the basics. Maybe not quite the bunny hill, but I got to go back to the basics, because otherwise I may not be coming home from this trip. Like I was lucky to get it down the first time.
Yeah,
Um,
it was the same way, Scott, in German or language training is part of the special forces
right.
training and things like that. So for me, I had 4 months of German, and day one, I'm in a small class with probably 15 other Green Berets, and our instructor goes around the room and it's like, "Hey, how many people have been exposed to German?" Which was like 75% of our class. And then it was like the other 20% was like, well, who's been exposed, maybe not to German, but to another language? That was the other 20%. And I'm like the one guy there, you know, had a, this is my first encounter with a foreign language, didn't even do it in high school. I'm sitting there with West Pointers. I'm sitting there with guys that were stationed in Germany. And it's like, it's kind of the same thing. Like you're starting from a disadvantage,
Right.
but you have to embrace it, look for the opportunities, keep going, work hard. It's easy to be humbled in situations like that, and just don't quit, drive on.
Yeah, exactly. So during your time in the Green Berets, other than training, did you ever have to use the skiing that you learned?
No, nope, never did. Never did. It was just training. It's the same way with this is another great example, learning Morse code. Learning Morse code was probably the hardest thing mentally that I ever did in the military. I mean, the hardest thing, and it really messes with you, but never did have to use it, not one single time. As soon as I graduated from the qualification course, never used it one time. I think they ended up finally doing away with it,
Okay.
but yeah, another humbling experience for sure.
Yeah, and both of those things are things that I gotta imagine, if you needed them, it would be really great to know, but the likelihood of you needing them are probably slim to none. Especially you deployed to Iraq, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I was
Yeah,
an Iraq
probably
guy.
not a whole lot of skiing going on in Iraq.
Yeah, no skiing going on over there in Iraq, and no Morse code for
Yeah,
sure. I
right,
can
right.
attest to that. Yeah.
So what was your time in Iraq like? What was that deployment like?
I was there in '03. I was up north. Actually, we're getting ready to come up on our 20-year anniversary. We were a little bit late to the game by a few days, thanks to Turkey, because they didn't want to cooperate and give us overflight permission or the ability to use their land. So we were a little bit late to the fight because the State Department was going back and forth with Turkey, and they had demands and things like that. So We ended up flying in on March 22nd. That was Operation Ugly Baby. So in 2 more days, I'll have my 20th anniversary of our infill into northern Iraq, which, we didn't have the ability to soften up all the AAA, the anti-aircraft artillery. So our flight in, we really got lit up. Thank God we had phenomenal Air Force crews that were just amazing, man. Just amazing pilots and crew. They were able to get us in safely. So '03, I mean, we were working with the Kurdish Peshmerga, and that was interesting. The fall of Mosul was interesting. We were at Mosul Airport, and that was when General Petraeus had the 101st, and they ended up driving all the way up north. And I remember when the 101st got there. '04 and '05, things started picking up a little bit. Like '03, you could kind of see like toward the end because we were only there for a couple months. But '03, I remember pointing out like, some of these people aren't very happy. Like, I think we expected, like, oh my gosh, the Americans, we love you guys so much. And some people were like that. But I remember specifically seeing some people, some young Iraqi guys, and they looked at us like, man, we hate you dudes so much. And I just remember like, that's kind of odd, interesting, and I
Right.
remember telling some of the guys, but '04, '05, we were on the Iranian border, and things were picking up a little bit more. The IED threat was, I don't know if you remember some of those times, but it was like a chess match. It was PhD level, war fighting with the way the IEDs came about and things like that. Because
Yeah.
we started in soft skin vehicles up north, and then we started with, we didn't have armored Humvees. We had the doors out and all that stuff. We had unarmored. And then we kept playing chess. And then we had armored vehicles, and then we had speed. We used speed as to our advantage. And then they came out with EFPs. It didn't matter if you were going 100 miles an hour or 60 miles, so all of these things. But '04, '05, we were on the Iranian border. Things started picking up a little bit. '06, just crazy,
Hmm.
crazy. We were in Baghdad in '06. We were in Adamiyah, which was the last Sunni suburb in Baghdad that remained Sunni because everything else went Shia.
Okay.
And that was intense. That was violent. The Iraqi civil war ended up breaking out on 22 February '06, right in the middle of our rotation. So I'm pretty sure that year were the most deaths for Iraqi civilians. It was one of the most deadly years for local Iraqis. I think it was the third deadliest for American forces. So just a
Yeah.
violent time period. Then '07, I was in Baghdad again. That was my last rotation. And we did a lot of targeting and things like that. We were at the airport. Another just very violent rotation.
Yeah. My brother was in Iraq. He was in Ramadi in '06. And just the stories that I heard from him, you're talking about the IEDs and other things that were going on over there. Just it was like they knew leaving the wires, they were going to get into some sort of contact. It wasn't a matter of if, but when and
Yeah.
what. It was just so intense. And he actually was sent there as kind of a replacement for because they lost a number of people, and whether they're through injuries or deaths and things like that. And so he was deployed over there with a group of, I want to say, probably 20 or so guys, just as kind of replacements to fill in the gaps where they needed them at the tail end of that unit's deployment. And he said that 6 months or so he spent over there were just insane.
I can
So
imagine. I mean, being in Ramadi in '06, like I
yeah.
could imagine that was a dangerous, deadly time period for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's jump forward a little bit here. So you get out of the military and you start getting into the museum work, something you probably never saw yourself doing.
Never.
And so you get into that. How did you get into that? Like what was the path there for you?
Yeah, because it's definitely an interesting career path for sure.
Right.
So so I had a guy that actually served on my detachment when I was a team sergeant. He was an operator who served on my team and worked for me. Well, he was up in that area. He was working at Fort Belvoir. And I was going up to DC toward the end of my career. We were doing a lot of surveillance exercises in DC, like us and every single other government agency that does surveillance in DC. But there was one time I was up there, and I just he was looking, he got out, he ended up getting out, and he ended up getting a job at the Museum of the Bible as the global, like he was on the global side, global director of security. And the Museum of the Bible was under construction. They were building it in Washington, D.C., a 430,000 square foot museum, $550 million. Like, it was a big deal, right? So I'd made a comment to him on one of my trips up to DC. I was at his house for a barbecue, and I said, "Hey, man, getting ready to get out. So if you ever need any help, give me a holler." And we kind of laughed about it because, I was in North Carolina. He was actually at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, but he's in, the DC area. And I think about a week or two later, he ended up calling me and said, "Hey, man, were you serious? I mean, would you even consider working at a museum? Would you even consider moving to Washington, DC?" And I was like, "Well, hey, man, it's a job. And, I'm getting ready to retire, so I need something. This is a business decision, a family decision. I need to support my family." And sure enough, man, one thing led to another. I went up there and interviewed with their president and had a great interview and was lucky enough to get selected to be the first director of security at the Museum of the Bible, and things took off, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Definitely just a stroke of luck that you happen to know the right person, was there at the right time when he was looking for some sort of help, and got you yourself in the door. And then, so how did that eventually lead to you working for the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation and what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a great transition, but I had about 3 years at the museum, and I did security, I did operations, I was there during construction. I started there in July 16. So I had, well over a year of construction before the Museum of the Bible opened in November of 2017. So I had a good, right seat to the construction phase and the build up and the grand opening and the day-to-day ops. So I got to see all of that. And then I was even exposed to more museums when I was a consultant. I was working for Thornton Tomasetti, world-renowned firm. They work all over the place. And I did a lot of museums there too. National Museum of Intelligence and Special Operations, which they're still building. The Milken Center for Advancing the American Dream, which I believe they're getting ready to open in DC right beside the White House. And some Jewish institutions. So I still continued working on museums because I had the background. And it was in that capacity, Thornton Tomasetti, they allowed me to transfer from DC to Dallas, Texas, because they have an office in Dallas. And that was a good move for my family, to come to Texas. So in that capacity, I ended up meeting the president and CEO of the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, Chris Cassidy, who, by the way, has a very interesting background. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's a former chief NASA astronaut with loads of time out in space. He's an MIT guy, and he's leading the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. So as a consultant, I was able to meet Chris, and I just came in and we had a great meeting, and it was basically me just being like a good human being, a good American. And I said, "Hey, man, I love what you're doing. I've heard about this, museum that you guys are building, and I think it's awesome. If you ever need anything, let me know." And I had a black notebook, and I started going through some notes from my experience and my time at the Museum of the Bible. And I went through a whole list, and I just basically said, "Hey, I have all of these lessons learned. I've went through all of these things. I've experienced all of these things. So if you need anything, here's my number. Give me a call." And I was going at the time where Chris and his team was located. It was right beside Globe Life Field, where the Texas Rangers play. So I was on Governor Abbott's, the Texas Task Force for Concert Safety. I was on that task force because there was a concert down in Houston and a bunch of people got killed. So I was on that task force. I was getting ready to give a presentation at the Rangers, and I had, 30 minutes with Chris. And then I asked him, I said, "Hey, can you show me where I need to get into the Texas Rangers? I have this presentation, this Governor Abbott's thing." And he showed me, and then he said, "Hey, would you be interested in working here for us?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, I would be." So that was just kind of like the start of it. And then, one thing led to another. We had a couple more meetings, and I did a couple presentations, and I was fortunate enough to be offered a position. And, I was just so proud to take it and to be part of this, because for me, and I think it's Chris the same way, because Chris and I were talking about this, and he said, man, he found himself up in space, and he's looking out and he's like, gosh, this is getting ready to come to an end. And I still want to serve. Like, what's next for me? How can I continue to serve? And I felt that was the same way. I mean, I thought I was doing honorable, noble work, at the Museum of the Bible as a security consultant, keeping people safe, keeping infrastructure safe. But working at the National Medal of Honor Museum was on a different level, and it just made my heart feel good that I could continue serving and giving back. So yeah, that's kind of where it started and ended up.
That's an interesting path to go through, and how you got all the way to where you are now. And I know the feeling that you have when it's like, yeah, I'm doing some work. It's good work. It's, honest work. Everything that you're doing, it's good stuff, but it's not serving necessarily in that same capacity that you might. You're not serving the people who sacrificed or did some great things and stuff like that. And it while it is good stuff that you're doing, it maybe isn't quite as meaningful as it could be in another capacity. And so I understand kind of where you're coming from, because that's, I mean, honestly, that's part of the reason why I do this podcast, is to give back to the military and the veteran community, because there's so much out there that people need help with. And they're struggling, they're trying to figure things out. And that's just kind of why this podcast even exists, right? And to just kind of help people out and continue serving.
Yeah,
um
I think that's honorable work, Scott. I mean, you're doing something so honorable and noble, and through the different messages of what you're talking about, what your guests are talking about. This is a new generation, and this generation, they listen to a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of multitasking going on, and it's so easy, to drive in the morning, or be on your commute if it's a train, or whatever it might be, and you can just you can be listening to a podcast for 15, 20 minutes on your way to work, finish it up on the way back. But that's what this generation is doing, and I think it's a great service that you and others are doing. I've been on a few of the other veteran podcasts, and I just think that there's folks out there that are listening, and they need to hear some of these messages, like, hey man, I'm not the only one that's
right.
struggling. Like, even at Thornton Tomasetti, I mean, when I walked in there, I'm a much older guy. I'm experienced, former Green Beret, and I'm starting over day one, dude. I'm with some of the smartest people in the country. These are all engineers. I'm not an engineer. I have a security risk management background, but man, talk about like being a fish out of water.
Right.
But that's just the way it is. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep grinding. You gotta keep working, and you gotta, keep figuring it out. So I think it's a great message, man. I appreciate what you're doing.
No, I appreciate that too. I think the stuff that we're doing here with the podcast, like you said, people could listen to it on their commute, they can listen to it in the gym, they could listen to it anywhere. And the cool thing about it that I found just through talking to other people is that some people, there may be some stigma still associated with mental health things or other things that they might be dealing with. Nobody has to know what you're listening to. You got headphones on, whatever, like nobody knows what you're listening to. It doesn't really matter. You can listen to it in the comfort of your own car or your home or your
Yeah.
office or whatever. Nobody has to know what you're listening to. And it's awesome, because you can still find the resources and the help that you need, or the encouragement, the inspiration, whatever it is that you want to call it. You can find all that stuff through the podcast. My podcast, other podcasts that are out there do very similar type things. I don't care where they find it, honestly. I just want them to find it. And
Yeah.
if it means that they're sitting there with their headphones on, listen to whatever inspiration that they need and giving them the hope to keep pushing forward another day. And like you said, in one of your 3 steps, don't quit. Just
Yeah.
keep going and don't quit. That's to me the best part about all of this. And I found there's a lot of people who prefer listening to the audio version versus watching the video version of the podcast. And I believe it's probably for that reason, where they can have that kind of confidentiality. Like nobody has to know what it is that they're actually listening to. And they go, yeah, I'm just listening to music. Like, who
Yeah.
cares? Nobody needs to know what you're listening to, right?
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk more about the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. Tell us some of the things that the foundation has going on, what you guys are doing to help out this community.
Yeah, for sure. So we're heavily under construction. We broke ground last March on National Medal of Honor Day, which is March 25th, coming right around the corner. So we broke ground March 25th, 2022. So we're right around our first year of construction. And when you say, or when you hear the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, I know that's a lot of words, but we're a three-pronged project. There's going to be a museum and an institute that's co-located in Arlington, Texas. And there'll eventually be a monument that'll be built in Washington, D.C., nation's capital. So our museum is scheduled to open. We still got a couple more years, but scheduled to open early 2025. And we're in a perfect location in Arlington, Texas. I mean, right beside AT&T Stadium where the Cowboys play, right beside Globe Life where the Texas Rangers play. They're building an 888 room hotel with a convention center. I mean, man, we are in a great place. We're so close to Dallas Fort Worth Airport. We're so close to Dallas Love Field. Dallas Fort Worth is like the 4th largest metropolitan in the United States. Texas just is the second state to go over 30 million people, second only to California. It seems like we're growing daily, but we just have a ton of people. We have a lot of patriotic people in Texas. I mean, we have a lot of patriotic people across the country, but we have a lot of patriotic people here in this area. So we're really, really excited. Just today, we had an event. Our offices are in Choctaw Stadium, which is the old open stadium where the Rangers used to play back in the day. Just today, we had 2 Medal of Honor recipients. We had Captain Flo Groberg, Medal of Honor recipient from Afghanistan, and we had Major General Pat Brady, Medal of Honor recipient, one of the most just decorated medevac helicopter pilots in the history of our military. But they were both at an event today, and it's just kind of surreal to me. I have to pinch myself, like, I spent 20. Scott, you served, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
about 6 years.
6 years. Were you
Yeah.
ever around a Medal of Honor receipt?
Only recently, I met Dakota Meyer at an event a couple months ago.
Okay, but
And
while you were in.
while I was serving, no, not while I was serving.
See, the same for me, man. I served 26 and a half years. I was only ever around one recipient. That was Bob Howard, MACV-SOG, Medal of Honor recipient, Vietnam. Guy was a total beast. But it's very rare. Like, it's a rare occurrence, because there's only 65 living Medal of Honor recipients. That's it. So, feel privileged that you got to meet Dakota. I haven't had a chance to meet Dakota, but it's always so nice to be around the recipients. I gave General Brady a little bit of a hard time, just, kind of in a fun way. But we have a podcast, the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. It's called Mission Inspire, if I could give that little plug out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mission Inspire. And General Brady was on the first podcast with one of our former CEOs. And the former CEO asked General Brady, he was like, hey, tell me about your hero. You're a Medal of Honor recipient. You're one of the most decorated men, alive. Do you have a hero? Tell me about him. And it was one of General Brady's crew chiefs from Vietnam, young kid, like 21 years old. Kid had been in a minefield with him. Kid had been shot in the face by a sniper, shot in the chicken plate. I mean, and he had saved, thousands of people. And General Brady was talking about this kid. And then, decades later, this guy was on his deathbed, and he wanted General Brady to take care of all of his arrangements. And this kid was from, well, I say kid, but as he got older, he was from Turkey Creek. I think it was Turkey Creek, Kentucky. But General Brady had made a comment. It's like, man, I had to go back and take care of all the funeral arrangements. And, Turkey Creek, Kentucky, like they don't even speak English in Turkey Creek, Kentucky. So when I saw him today, I said, General Brady, I heard that podcast. When you said that, I cracked up laughing because I can appreciate that being a West Virginia boy, even though I feel like I've lost my accent years and years and years ago, because my first duty station was California, but it just like really tickled me that he said something like that. But he was one of the speakers today, and he always delivers. I mean, he always gives great speeches, great presentations, and it's from the heart. And one of the things that he likes to say, it's like, hey, this medal, this ribbon around our neck doesn't make us special, but it allows us to do special things. And he's just has so many of those type of sayings that every time I listen to him, I just feel enriched or smarter or more patriotic. And I think that is what this museum is going to do for our country, something that's going to be more unifying than dividing. The recipients come from all different backgrounds. They're not, they're all different races, they're all different religions, political affiliations. Like, this transcends politics. This isn't a political thing. This is an American thing. And the
Right.
Medal of Honor recipients, the way I see it, they represent all of us. They represent all of us that have served. They represent all that we have lost, all of our brothers and sisters that we've lost. They represent all of the people in this country because they come from those people. These were ordinary people who did extraordinary things above and beyond the call of duty. And I think listening to their stories are going to inspire a lot of people. And I think people are going to be able to draw things from their story. And when you hear the recipients talk about, like, hey, what do you really want out of this museum? They don't want people to come in and be a big glory fest about, look what I did, or I saved 5,000, or you shot this many. It's not about that. It's about the values that are inherent in the Medal of Honor recipients. And we talk about them all the time: courage, sacrifice, commitment, integrity, citizenship, patriotism, and how those values and the character traits, all of those things, that's what they're excited and jazzed up about. That's
Yeah.
what they want people to learn.
And I think that's a great thing to do too, because like you said, these recipients, they come from all different walks of life, all different economic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, political backgrounds, race, everything.
Yeah.
They're all over the board, right? And there are people out there who can hear one of these stories from one of these Medal of Honor recipients and see a little bit of themselves in that person. Maybe they came from a similar upbringing, maybe from the same town even, or the same, area of the country. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of like my upbringing. That's who I was when I was a kid. And, I was the same, guy who went out and got in trouble, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
then I grew up and, matured a little bit and had uh this moment, right? We all have these moments when you got to be courageous, you got to be, and but you don't have those moments the way that some of these guys have had, right? There's things where you got to stand up and do the right thing, and those types of things, right? But not in the face of danger the way these guys have in most cases,
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. Like, you don't have to grab a rifle and go to Syria and fight ISIS or Al Qaeda. I
right,
mean, it takes courage to step in if you see a kid getting bullied at a
right,
school. That takes courage to do that. And actually, I read something today that made so much sense, and it resonated with me. And I was just like, wow, that's true. It takes courage to ask for help,
yeah,
or to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm in a bad place right now. I need some help. And I think that's a good lesson. We have a lot of folks out there. We have a lot of veterans that are out there that are hurting, And unfortunately, some of them, they turn to alcohol or they turn to pills. You know, I think it takes courage to raise your hand and or go to your buddy or to go to someone from your family and say, "Hey, I'm not in a good place right now. I
Right.
need help. Please
Yeah.
help me."
That
And
is
I guarantee you
huge.
they'll get some help, man. They'll get some help.
But it takes the courage to go and actually ask for that type of help, because it doesn't just knock on your door. It doesn't show up on your doorstep like an Amazon package. You got
Yeah,
to
you're
go and
right.
do something to get it, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, that does take courage. But I think having a place where people can go and learn some of these stories and find out more about these people, even having some of these people there to share their stories and their inspiration, will help develop a more courageous group of people to go and do those types of things. We're not talking about running into danger all the time
Right.
necessarily, right? Because that's not your typical everyday experience, although it does happen from time to time. You have things like, the Boston Marathon bombing or something like that, or 9/11, where people
Yeah.
did have to go run in to a dangerous situation, and they didn't know whether or not they were going to be in danger, but they saw there was something. And I think those people have very similar amount of heroism as some of the Medal of Honor recipients, that
Uh,
that they would get that too.
Scott, it's funny that you say that. I listened to General Brady today talk about heroes, and he was talking about females, and he was talking about how heroic they were, like during the wars, World War II and
Yeah.
Vietnam and GWAT, and they had to stay at home and they had to raise the kids and they had to do all of these different things. And he was like, that is heroic. That takes courage. That takes sacrifice. That takes commitment. And just for him to recognize that, it was like, wow, it like you could hear kind of a pin drop.
Hmm.
But I do have a spoiler alert, and I've seen this over and over and over. I think when you see or you hear about the National Medal of Honor Museum, and I want to ask you a question about that, Scott, here in a second. But I think when most people they think about the museum and they think about it's going to be war and glory and combat and all of those type of things. But I think what most people will not think of, it's actually the ultimate love story. I mean, really, I mean, why did General Brady, I mean, how was he able to save 5,000 people, and get them out? I mean, he had a love for his fellow human being. And
Yeah.
why would someone jump on a grenade? I mean, when you really look at it and you peel back all the different layers, it's
Right.
like, I love my brother, I love my sister, and I wanted to protect them more than my life. And I was willing to do that. It's the ultimate love story.
Right. Yeah. When you think of war, you think of death, destruction, chaos,
Chaos,
all that
violence.
violence, hatred, all that kind of stuff that goes into it. But yeah, there's love involved too, and it's strange. Like when you think of it, you don't really, like I said, you don't think of war as having love involved, but there is a love. People you serve with, like, you may not love every single one of them, but you'll die for them. You'll put yourself out there and you'll fight for them. You're talking about, jumping on a grenade. Like, that's not something that's normal. You don't that
No,
that's not a normal reaction that someone's going to have. It's like, I'm going to go jump on this thing, and I know I'm going to get blown up. It's, probably going to kill me, but I'm going to go do it anyways, because I care more about the people behind me that I'm protecting than myself. And that's incredible. Yeah. And that's a great thing to have coming out of this museum.
yeah, and I really had to do a lot of self-reflection on this, for me personally. My first podcast, I was on Combat Story episode 74 with Ryan Fugit, and there was a part of the podcast where he was like, "Hey, you guys were in this serious firefight, your vehicle had got shot up, engine block was killed, you had to get towed out of there. Was there any doubt in your mind that you would come back? And I remember it was like, no, of course not. Like we told our brothers from the 101st, hey, we're coming back. We're gonna go get more ammo. We're gonna be back.
Yeah.
And it was like it wasn't even a thought. But it's like, well, why was it? Like, why wasn't it a thought? It was like it was more than, the bad guys and all that type of stuff. Those were my brothers.
Right.
And it really was about love for another human being, and you had trust, and they counted on us and we counted on them. So I had to do a lot of self-reflection. It was like, wow, it really is. Let me ask you this though, Scott,
Sure.
put you on the spot here. So you've heard a little bit about the National Medal of Honor Museum. Would this be something if you're ever in Texas? Where are you at, Scott?
I'm in Arizona. I'm actually so you mentioned the Texas Rangers being right down the street, kind of in your area. We are about where I live is about 3 miles away from their spring training stadium
Oh,
here in
cool.
Arizona. So
Yeah, yeah. I will be, my wife and I, we will be at the Rangers opening. I forgot who they're playing, but we will be there. But let me ask you this. If you're ever in Texas, would you consider visiting the National Medal of Honor Museum with you and your friends or your family? And if so, because obviously there's only, there's ever been like 3,500 Medal of Honor recipients. So that's not a big group. But why would you, if you would, like, why would you go to the museum? What would you expect to take out of that museum, maybe to learn or to share or reflect? I mean, what would this museum, what would you think?
First off, yeah, I would definitely, if I'm in the area, I'm definitely gonna check it out. Um, but let me just kind of take a step back for a second. A few months
Okay.
ago, I was in New York, and I had the opportunity to go up in the Freedom Tower where they rebuilt after 9/11, and
Yeah,
we looked down out of one of the windows. We were on like the 60 some odd floor, somewhere around there, and we're looking down on the basically the footprint of the Twin Towers that
sure.
were there, and it was just to me, it was just like kind of awe-inspiring. Like this is where like such a very significant event took place, and it was kind of it was humbling, in a way. It was looking down at it and saying like a lot of destruction, a lot of death, a lot of bad things came out of this. But here I am standing in this building and I felt perfectly safe. Like it was so good stuff came out of it too. And it was a good feeling to me. And looking down at it, I was humbled that I was honored to have been able to be there. Now, thinking about how that kind of applies to the museum that you're talking about here, just the stories of all of these recipients. I mean, there's you said 3,500 recipients. I mean, just the few that I know their stories because I've done some research. I've looked into them. I've read their books. I've heard their stories on podcasts and other shows and stuff like that. It's humbling to know that these types of people exist. It's great that they are on our side.
Yeah, right.
you know, and I feel like as a patriotic American, it's my duty maybe to share these stories with my children and let them know like that this is kind of the fabric of America. Like this
The
is
DNA.
the DNA of America, exactly. And I want them to grow up. I'm not necessarily pushing them to the military or pushing them to, go be some superhero Medal of Honor recipient or anything like that. Um, not at all. But I want them to know that's okay to be courageous, to do things that most people would be like, "Oh my god, I would never do that," type of thing. But do it for the right reasons, right? Like you're talking about the love of the people that you're serving with, the love of the kid who's getting bullied on the playground, things like that. I want them to grow up and be that type of person as well. Whether they have a medal hanging around their neck or not, to me, doesn't matter. It's really just about the character and the type of person that they are. And seeing some of these stories may just be that type of inspiration that they need in order to kind of push them towards living that type of life.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I agree. I heard General Brady, another thing he said today, he goes, when people come through the museum, they'll realize that superheroes don't wear capes. They wear dog tags. And I thought that was another good one. He's got a ton, if you ever pull up some of his videos, I think that would be, he is Mr. Inspiration for sure. But Scott, another thing that I think is interesting to point out, and you're a military guy and you've served and you know this thing, or you know what I'm getting ready to say here, but if you think back to the Civil War, the first Medal of Honor was awarded all the way back in 1863. This is our 160th anniversary, 160 years for Medal of Honor this year. But if you imagine, Scott, from Civil War, like the technology and the weapons and the equipment, I mean, how they fought back then to the way they fought now, everything has changed. It's more sophisticated. The weapons are more lethal, and we got drones and we got all of those things. So you think from the Civil War, 1863, all the way up to GWAT, all of the technology, all the way that we fight, the tactics, the techniques, procedures, everything has changed. But the one thing that's remained the same throughout those 160 years are those values.
Yeah.
From 1863 to now, the courage, sacrifice, commitment, integrity, citizenship, patriotism, those values remain. And I think when you're talking about the fabric, the DNA of our country, that's it. And it seems like, I think most would argue that we've gotten away from that as a country. And I think it's time to go back.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to look at things. The people are the things that remain the same. The weapons, the technology, the medical care, all of that stuff has changed.
Yeah.
And the people have remained the same. Their values and their commitment and their courage, they're still there. And I think that's an incredible thing that we still have that. But you're right, the country, I do believe, is drifting away from some of that. And I think it's time to kind of shift course back towards that type of way of thinking and way of life. And so getting this message out there through the museum, the monuments and the different programs that might put on there. Podcasts. Exactly. Podcasts.
Yep.
Sharing these messages, getting that message out there, I think is just super important for America and getting us back on the right track. Now, I know some of the listeners out there are going to want to help to contribute to the foundation, to the museum. Could you tell people first off, what is the foundation even looking for, as far as, are you looking for volunteers, donations, financial contributions, different things like that, or something else entirely? And where can people go to get involved?
So you can go to mohmuseum.org, mohmuseum.org. And yes, we are looking for contributions. We are looking for donations, all of those things. We are looking for volunteers. We would love for people to follow us on the different socials. We have the National Medal of Honor Museum. You can find us on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of those. Follow us, like us, comment on some of our things, be involved with us. Go to our website, do some research, reach out to us. There's not too many Darrell Utts on LinkedIn, so that's the only social media that I'm on at this time. Hopefully that will be changing very soon. But if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect, I'm always connecting with people, and people are always sending me messages, and I appreciate that. I post a lot. We're connected on LinkedIn, right, Scott?
I think so. Maybe. If not, we'll fix that soon.
Yeah, please. I typically do a bunch of posts on the museum. So yes, we're still knee deep into fundraising. That is a big thing for us. So any help that we can get would surely be appreciated. And just having people support, having the message get out there, having people talk about it. It's one of the biggest lessons that I learned from the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Even though we're building a $550 million museum right in the nation's capital, I could drive 3 blocks away from the museum construction site and I'd be talking to someone, and they'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, I work at the museum over there." And it's like, "Which museum? Smithsonian?" I'm like, "No, the Museum of the Bible. They're building." It's like, "They're building a Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Are you crazy?" It's like, "No." I mean, it's the one thing I learned though. You need to get that message out constantly, consistently, because the more people that hears it, the better.
Exactly. And
We
hopefully
got a
we've
great message. We want to share it.
Yeah, and hopefully we've accomplished that with this episode by getting the message out there to all the listeners. So I will have links to all of your social media and to the website in the show notes. I'll put that out there for the listeners. Check out the website, go make financial contributions, check out to see if they have any opportunities, if they need any volunteers for any particular things that they have going on. I know the museum isn't technically open yet, but there's
Nope.
still maybe some other things going on. Once when the museum's open, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more need coming through there. So just check out the website, follow them on social media, so that way when those needs do occur, you'll have a way of getting in touch and finding out about what it is that they are looking for. So Darrell, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I also appreciate not only your service but also everything that you're doing to continue to serve with the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.